Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Gonna do our prediction tier list. All right. Um, I apologize for being so late on this, but unfortunately, life does happen sometimes. So, with that being said, obviously, as in all of my tier list, left to right is gonna mean nothing. All right. S tier, A tier, B tier, C tier, and F tier. All right. S is going to be your meta specs, what I believe is going to be in the push race to world first or in the high keys, the most common things taken. A tier is going to be a good alternate. B tier is going to be, yeah, it's okay. C tier is going to be probably find something else. And F tier is don't bring it at all, don't touch it. All right. Now, with that being said, let's go ahead and jump into it. All right. First up, we got Death Knight. All right. So Blood. So I played a lot of Blood in season two. And looking at the way that they're changing, one of the biggest reasons to bring a Blood Death Knight was the grips. Now grips are gone. You're gonna start struggling once you get in those higher keys. Melee's gonna kill you off pretty easy. I'm gonna put it into a B tier. Um, I think that you can push the content, but I think that you're going to need a very specific group comp for it. I think you're going to need a very set in stone, like things need to go right and conditions need to be met. All right. Next up, we got Frost. Frost is actually looking really, really good. Everything I've been reading, everything I've been seeing from other people posting their PTR content, I'm going to put S into A tier. I don't quite think that it's got enough to make it into the S tier. I think that you do have good alternates to bring. Um, but yeah. Unholy. So Unholy is really not looking good. I'm gonna throw it into the C tier. I think that Unholy had its season. It did really well, and I think the design and the direction they're trying to take it is just not gonna work out. All right. Next up is Havoc. So again, I think Havoc is going to go into the A tier or end up in the A tier because I think it's going to require certain comps. I think that certain conditions will need to be met to get that into the S tier. And Vengeance looking as good as it is, um, I would say, yeah, it's probably going to be A tier just because of the Vengeance as well as the comp, which we'll talk about later. Okay. Um, Vengeance, I'm gonna put it in the S tier. I think that you're gonna take this spec in every key, especially chasing the high end content. The kite abilities with these new Shadowland dungeons and the bleeds, the kites, the stops, everything. I think that we are really, really gonna get a lot of Vengeance again, just because of the utility that it has. Next up, we got the Druid specs. So balance. I have actually been seeing a lot of negative things about balance. I've seen a lot of people complaining that it's just broken. I think that as it stands right now, it's going to be a C tier spec, and that's just because without your force set, you do no damage, and then with your force set, you're only doing damage around that. I think you could potentially, but I just don't think it's going to work out. Next up, we got Bear, good old Guardian Druid. Um, I think the biggest issue that Bear's gonna run into is its damage profile is very, very low, and I think that's gonna end up keeping it in either the B or the C tier. Um, you've got the survivability. Let's go B tier because you've got the survivability. You're able to self sustain. You're able to survive. You're able to live, but you can't do damage enough to keep up with everybody else. All right. Next up is Feral. Been seeing a decent amount from Pharaoh. Some people are saying it's really good, some people are saying it's bad. I'm gonna probably put it into the C tier with balance, just because I feel like again damage profiles and the way that it plays and works is just not gonna do great. All right. Next up we've got Restoration Druid. I think Resto Druid is gonna end up in the S tier. Um, Everything that they're doing to change all of the things that they've got going for them, I think that they're gonna pair very very well with all of the tanks. I think that the added damage is going to make it that much easier for restoration to just be the better tank, or excuse me, be the better healer. All right. Next up is Evoker. So I'm gonna put Devastation in the A tier. Um, the reason being the damage may not be the best, but they do have some utility. They bring a lust. They can really pop off in some AoE situations. They can do really, really well. So I think that again, I think group comp, if it aligns, I think that we're going to see some devastation. Okay. Augmentation, I think they're still a little bit behind. We're going to go and throw them in the B tier. Uh, I think that Aug could potentially come back. I think that with some damage buffs, then they might be a viable candidate. But I think right now they're just not making it work. Okay. Preservation Evoker. I think honestly for Mythic Plus and rate, it's gonna be an F tier. Um, the amount of work you have to put in beforehand is still incredible. You would need almost perfect group coordination, specific tanks, and like you're you're really gonna struggle if you're not prepared for what's coming next. Okay. Next up, we've got the Hunter specs. So Beast Mastery, I'm gonna put it in the B tier. I think that Beast Mastery is a struggle right now. I think it suffers from the same problem as every single Hunter spec does, is they fall over very, very easily. They're not very defensive. Um, they bring you a lot of utility and they bring a lot of damage, but you can only use that if you're alive. Okay. Marksmanship, so their damage profile being better, I'm gonna put them into an A tier spot. I think they're gonna suffer from the same thing as Beast Mastery, but I think that they offer higher damage, and so like you can kind of play around them a little bit better. All right. Survival, I'm gonna put it into the C tier. Um, Survival, it's everything I've been seeing is it suffering from the same thing Brewmaster Monk did for a long time, where there's just too many buttons and there's too many things to do all at one time, and I just don't think that you can I don't think you can effectively keep up without like 1,000 keybinds and macros and all that fun stuff. So I'm gonna throw it in the C tier. I don't really think it's got the damage from what I've been seeing either. Okay. Next up, we have the mage specs. So the mage specs, I'm gonna put fire into B tier. I'm gonna put frost into A tier, and I'm gonna put arcane into S tier. All right. So fire, I think fire's gonna suffer from the normal fire things. It's not doing as much damage. It does require you to stand still and cast a lot. Not 100%, but you are going to have to stand still and do some casting. The damage is just not quite there, and I don't really think the spec identity is there yet either. I think that is one of my biggest issues with fire is there's no real spec identity. Um, Frost, I'm gonna put Frost into the A tier because it's getting access to a lot of cheat deaths and everything, and if you're playing Frostfire, you can do 99% of your rotation standing still, and I think that the cleave damage from Frost is just a little bit better than Fire, especially with the changes that are coming. So that gives you really good AoE. It's got really, really strong single target, um, especially if it's one of those situations where you can stand still and do some hard casts. But even if you need to run around with the boss, like you can still do that. Arcane is going to stay S tier for the exact same reason that it's been S tier all season. Um, it's got insane single target. It's got insane priority target for those priority mobs. At the end of the day, Arcane is very, very well rounded for any situation, and I think that that is going to keep it there. Plus the utility and the survivability that it offers, I I don't see any reason why Arcane would not be in a S tier spec. So next up, we've got the monk specs. Okay, so Windwalker, I'm actually going to put it into B tier. I was debating between A and B, but I think that it's going to end up being a B tier just because it's going to suffer from the same target cap problems it always has, or not always has, but it has this expansion. I think that your damage is really going to fall off when you get to the higher keys. You're going to have to fight harder. The spec is just the talent tree is just so big that I think it needs to be reined in and I think it needs to be calmed down before you can actually like figure out what to do. I also I've noticed a lot of monks are either running no or one capstone in favor of other paths, and just not having enough talents, and I think that's a big problem. And I think that if they would address the talent tree, it could move up to the A tier, but I don't think it will. All right, next up we got Brewmaster. I'm gonna put Brewmaster into the A tier. I don't think Brewmaster is good enough to be an S tier tank, and the reason I say that is because you are so comp dependent and you are so like conditions dependent. It's got the survivability and it's got the damage, but I think at the end of the day, Brewmaster is going to suffer all the way up until it is no longer a comp dependent tank. You need specific types of healers. You need specific types of DPS. You need people that complement you, or you could fail. You need a healer who can keep up, or you could fall over and die. Like I really and truly think that um, Brewmaster is just not gonna make it to the S tier, but I definitely think that it's gonna be at in the meta. I think we're gonna see some very high keys with Brewmaster next season. Mistweaver, I'm gonna throw Mistweaver into the B tier. I think it's got some strong heals, but I think it suffers from button bloat, and I think it's gonna suffer from its class tree. Again, I think it's a good healer. I think it's got good potential, but I think you really need to be careful with playing Mistweaver because you have to be able to make sure that your group can keep up. Next up is going to be the Paladin specs. So first up, we've got Holy. I'm just going to go and throw it in the C tier. The identity is not great. The raid buff is non-existent. It's just overall, it's just not that great. The throughput is not keeping up with any of the other healers. I think the honestly, I think that preservation is outperforming them in throughput, but Holy doesn't require as much setup as preservation does, and I think that Holy Paladin is still viable in Mythic Plus, just not as like a first choice. Prop Paladin, I'm gonna put it into the S tier. I think it's gonna end up here just because of like the utility. I mean, you've got very similar to Demon Hunter. You've got a lot of utility to deal with individual things. You've got massive amounts of interrupts. You've got bubble. You've got really, really strong defensives. It's not necessarily the tankiest of tanks, and it doesn't have the best damage. But I do think that it's going to end up in the S tier for utility purposes and the fact that it still does really, really well. Right? Ret Paladin, I'm gonna honestly I'm gonna put this in. I think that Ret Paladin is going to suffer from the same affliction as some of these other specs where they have a lot that they bring to the party and they do really, really well, but they're just not doing enough damage to keep up in anything worth doing. And I think that that is a problem. I think that they've taken way too many nerfs. I think they've taken way too many nerfs to really push back. And if they would revert some of these changes, then I think they could push it up. All right. Discipline the pre specs are going to be next. So we got discipline. I think discipline is going to retain its S tier spec um spot. So I think discipline. The shields are going to be really good. The synergy it has with both of these tanks is really really good, and I think that you will be hard pressed to find a um a tank that won't synergize with a discipline priest, so it makes it a very universal healer. I think that at the end of the day, when push comes to shove, depending on how you do things and how things go, you're gonna have a very versatile healer, and I think that's gonna attract a lot of people. Um, e- Both of the hero talents are viable, and they're looking really good for individual situations. So I think that discipline is gonna be S tier just because of synergy and the universal playstyle. I also think that discipline has some really really good powerful heals that it can push out depending on the situation and whether you need synergy or excuse me, whether you need AoE healing or whether you need single target. I think discipline can rise and meet both of those. Um, and I think that it in general is just going to be a solid healer spec. Holy Priest, I'm gonna put into the A tier. Holy Priest looks like it's making a comeback. I don't think it's gonna be in the Race to World first or anything like that, or not Race to World first. The high key pushes. But I think that Holy Priest has a very good chance of doing some higher keys. I think the biggest issue they're gonna run into is their survivability, and that is gonna be the hardest part about playing a Holy Priest is you have to be on your game and you have to be able to keep yourself up and you have to be able to get your heals out. You have to be able to get your heals out. You have to be able to keep the group topped off and built up. So I think the mana, managing your mana, and I think that managing your own survivability is going to be the biggest issue that you run into as a holy priest. Shadow priest, I am honestly going to put it in the A tier as well. I think that you are going no matter what group comp you're running, you're gonna have a priest in that group. Um, I know that Shadow is looking really good. They've got some good damage profiles. Everything I'm seeing, Shadow looks really, really good this season. So I'm honestly a firm believer that Shadow is gonna make a comeback. And I think that if we don't see a disciplined priest in the S tier, I think we are for sure gonna see a Shadow Priest. I think that honestly, you could even do it like this and it would be perfectly fine. Personally, I don't predict that'll happen. I think Discipline's just a little bit too strong. So, in all, I think that Shadow is going to really come back and surprise a lot of people, especially since a lot of high end players are now testing out group comps with Shadow Priests. Okay. So, next up, we have our rogue talent, or rogue talents. Yeah, we got the rogue talents now, guys. Anywho, so now we have our rogue specs. All right, assassination I think is going to end up in the S tier. Uh, outlaw is going to end up in the S tier, and I think that sub is going to end up in the C tier. So assassination and outlaw are both looking really, really good. I think that you're going to run one or the other depending on your group comp. I think that when push comes to shove, assassination is going to be better just because of the utility it brings. And I think that when you're looking at the overall of what you need and want, assassination is going to fill those check marks, especially being able to do the vanishes for more interrupts and silences and stuff and keeping up with everything. I think assassination is just the better option. I think that outlaw is going to be a very close second. I think the problem outlaw is going to come into is it doesn't have the damage profile that assassination does. Um, last I heard, the PTR testing had it at 3% behind assassination, if I remember correctly. So I think that really what you need to what you're gonna have to look at is what do you need a rogue for, and that's how you're gonna make a decision. All right. Sub, honestly, like from what I've been seeing, sub has really good burst, but that's it. They're bursting really, really well, but they're not really sustaining and they're not really holding out. So I just don't think that they have what it takes to be a consistent spec for a group. Situations always, but not not overall. All right. Next up, we have our shaman specs. So I've seen mixed reviews about elemental. I'm gonna be honest with you. I foresee elemental being in the A tier, and I see enhancement being in the A tier, and I see restoration in the S tier. So elemental and enhancement appear to be doing similar damages. I know that there have been some changes along the way. I think elemental is coming out on top right now just because of how everything works. But I think elemental and enhancement both they offer virtually the same utility. They can really do the same things. It's just a matter of do you want melee or do you want ranged? I think that's what we're really going to see with shaman in season 3. Okay. Next up is going to be restoration. I do not see a reason why you would not take every resto druid that you possibly can get. The amount of heals per second, the AoE healing, the single target healing, like the damage profile, I think that shaman has the potential to be the S tier healer, and I really think that they could replace discipline in the meta. All right. So next up are the warlock specs. So demonology, I'm gonna put into the B tier. Um, I think that demonology is just suffering from an identity crisis and a playstyle crisis. Their identity is not what the players want. The way that it plays is just not really what most players are looking for. I think that that is going to really hurt them. Okay, so next up we have Affliction. Unfortunately, Affliction, I think is just gonna go in the C tier. Until we get some kind of change to Vile Taint or Agony, Affliction Warlock is never going to be more than a C tier spec. I really and truly, I think that there's potential for it to push higher depending on the player, obviously. But in general, it's not going to be anything more than a C tier spec until we get that fixed because you just lose so much DPS. Okay. Next up is Destruction. I think Destruction's going to end up in the B tier as well. I think that it performs really well. I think it's doing really well. I think that the problem that it's going to run into is all of these A tier specs are just going to be better, and I think that's going to keep them from rising past a B tier. Um, if the Warlock specs got like I would say like a 5% damage buff and a fix to Vile Taint, I think that we could potentially push them up one tier each. Um, but at the same time, you still have the playstyle crisis that is going on with all three specs. So it's annoying, but unfortunately, it's a Warlock thing. Okay. So next up, we have Warrior. So arms, I'm going to put into the B tier. I think that the damage is looking okay. I think that the utility and the reason to bring it is just not there. Um, and I think it's going to be outperformed by protection. I think that Fury and arms are going to be a tier below where they could be just because of how good protection looks. Um, so Fury is actually, I think, going to end up in. I'm gonna give it the benefit of the doubt, and I'm gonna put it in the C tier. I think it could go into C or F, either one. Mostly because at the end of the day, Fury is just not doing the damage to keep up. The talents are not really doing great. You're losing DPS with capstones. Like it's a mess right now. All right, and then finally, last but not least, we have Protection Warrior, which I do believe is going to end up in the meta. All right. So I see protection and the gameplay and the style and the way that they're changing it. I really and truly think that protection is going to go up, but I don't think it's going to be an S tier spec by majority. I think it's going to be an S tier spec by those select people who can still play a protection warrior and still do well on a protection warrior. They're going to be the ones who are pushing up and onward. All right. That's it for today's video. Honestly, I hope you guys liked it. If you did, please like the video, subscribe. Again, this is just my prediction. All right, nothing is determined, nothing is set in stone yet. So, hope you guys enjoyed. Leave a comment if you disagree with one of my predictions, something I said, why I said it, or if you have your own idea for a group comp that could really push. By all means, leave it in the comments below. Thanks, and y'all have a good one.